Ben.
All right, let's go back to one of the big stories of the day. South Africa marking International Workers' Day along with many countries around the world. President Cyril Ramaphosa addressed the celebration organised by Trade Union Federation COSATU in KwaZulu-Natal. A rival federation, SATU, marched to the Durban City Hall. The biggest union under the umbrella of SATU, the National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, now says its political arm is ready to contest the polls next week. NUMSA was expelled by COSATU in 2014. It no longer supports the ANC in elections, therefore. Its political wing, the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, or SRWP, was launched last year. Meanwhile, the Federation of Unions of South Africa commemorated Workers' Day with events in Mthatha and Johannesburg. So lots going on, but let's assess workers' rights in South Africa. We're joined to discuss Executive Director at the Centre for Development and Enterprise, Ann Bernstein, via Skype. And thank you for being with us. So, putting aside unemployment, which is a scourge, a crisis, and there are so many people who don't even have a job, cannot celebrate today. Beyond that, what are the burning issues for workers in 2019?
Well, the first thing is we have to discuss how we define a worker today. We have about 16.5 million people who are employed in South Africa, but 10 million and growing who are not employed. So these are different groups of people who want to work in South Africa who are not employed.
And is that something that workers' federations themselves should be concerned with? Sometimes they're accused of looking at people who are in jobs rather than the reasons why people aren't getting jobs.
Well, I have sympathy with the unions who are reflecting what they perceive as the needs of their workers, of their members. The national government has to look at the national interest, and that is to deal with South Africa's massive unemployment crisis. And our laws and regulations make that extremely difficult. We encourage capital investment rather than labor-intensive activities, and we don't fully appreciate the scale of the unemployment crisis. At least 550 young people join the unemployment queue every single day. And that's been happening over the last decade. So we have to do things differently. And we are saying that voters should be asking their political parties before they vote for them, what are they going to do about youth unemployment that isn't just the same old, but is different, because what we've been doing has failed terribly.
And obviously there's a whole lot of reasons for that. To what extent are labour laws, in your view, to blame? Some applaud the fact that we have some of the most progressive labour laws in the world. Others say that is actually hampering people getting into jobs. Where do you stand, Anne?
Look, many of South Africa's labour laws have been introduced as a result of our apartheid history, but they're too high for a country which is creating enormous barriers to employment. We have to accept that many South Africans are not well educated, do not have work experience. And what we need is to get growth going in the country, but growth that is labour intensive and that creates jobs for the workforce we actually have, not the highly skilled one we wish we had. So we have to deal with our labour market, and we need to introduce significant reforms there, and we have to deal with the many issues that are holding back faster growth in this country.
And would it be possible to relax some of those laws? I know some investors say, workers want to work at certain times. The laws stop them, and they wouldn't be penalized for that. They wouldn't have to work extra hours. It's just the actual times. Things like that have come up in mining. Could labour laws be relaxed without leading to exploitation? Because I think often the narrative is that either we have these strong labour laws or we have exploitation.
Well, South Africa is now a perfect case study of the failure of that argument. People have said we've got to raise the standards, the conditions of work, we've got to raise the the wages of workers with no relationship to productivity. And the result is that we have probably the largest unemployment crisis in the world. So there is a relationship here, and South Africans have to start doing things differently. The issue is not what's happening in mining, although that's one regulation you're telling me about. I'm not an expert about that. But the real issue is what holds back small firms from developing in our country. We're losing small firms. Everyone talks, but we have fewer small firms than we had a few years ago. And this is in the thousands, tens of thousands of small firms that are not operating here. But South Africa thinks that if we carry on with the way we are, where we raise the barriers to employment and we raise the risks of investors and for investment, that we can start the economy growing again. Well, we're not. We're in deep trouble, and we have to do things differently. And that's why we're saying there are a number of questions that people should be asking about employment before they vote next week. And one of the key issues is it better for the unemployed who are willing to work at current wages? Is it better for them to be unemployed or to have a low-wage job? We're absolutely convinced that South Africa needs to fix our visa laws so that we can get a lot more tourists, which will create a lot more labor-intensive jobs. But we also need export processing zones where we try out finding our space in the global market for low-skill export jobs in textiles, in toy assembly, and other things where we can employ lots of people, and disproportionately women. But if we refuse to do any of those things, South Africa is going to continue to be a world outlier in terms of how many people are unemployed. And this is a disaster for these people and for the country. We have to think about reform, not continuing with the same conversation that has led us into this terrible situation.
Okay, we will be speaking to some of the labor